Tonight, kids in cages in America. Families split up. Those images from the administration's new zero-tolerance policy at our border. We're going to open up the phone lines so you at home can chime in and speak out. Then, 2 new corruption trials starting in New York just this week. We'll take a look at those and also some of their actions on the corruption calendar. Also, our conversation with Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Seymour Hersh. He's known for breaking some of the biggest stories in the last 70 years, and his new book tells his own personal story. Evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you for joining us tonight. And we've got a special format for this evening because you are always a big part of it, but your voice will be heard. We are joining the national conversation about this policy of this administration where they've decided that separating kids from their families at the border is in the American self-interest. We're asking you to call in and weigh in on this debate. The toll-free number right there at the bottom of your screen. We're going to keep that number up throughout this program here, 888-766-2428. Again, we'll get to your phone calls coming up in the next 2 segments, so I suggest you get on the phone lines now while they're open. Now, this picture of a 2-year-old Honduran girl crying puts a human face on what we're talking about tonight. She's screaming as her mother is searched, then detained right in front of the toddler's eyes. Now, there are hundreds of other stories just like that. And for the first time, we even have ears inside the detention center where kids are being held. ProPublica, they obtained this alarming audio that has a translation for you right on your screen.
Bueno, aquí tenemos una orquesta. ¿De dónde son ustedes? ¿Y tú?
Guatemala.
No llores. Vas a llegar con... Mira, ella te va a explicar y te va a ayudar. ¿Cierto?
Back in D.C., President Trump, he is as always deflecting blame, even though it was his administration, his choice, his policy to split these families up. Here he is just this morning.
I say it's very strongly the Democrats' fault. They're obstruction, they're really obstructionist, and they are obstructing. The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility. If the Democrats would sit down instead of obstructing, we could have something done very quickly. Good for the children, good for the country, good for the world. We're stuck with these horrible laws. They're horrible laws. What's happening is so sad,
Pretty much everything I heard was a lie, and to my 2 cents, any belief that he's really so concerned about the children and how sad it is, also, I believe, not born with any evidence whatsoever. But we'll get into that more. So that was the president today. Well, this afternoon, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, she addressed the media, and again, she blamed Democrats, which again, there is zero evidence or any fact pattern that they had anything to do with the implementation of the policy that we're seeing playing out in front of us.
Secretary Nielsen, if you could, what you talked about there, DHS is no longer ignoring the law. You're calling on Congress to change the law. I mean, that is the big message here. Members of Congress on the Democratic side say that you are using children as a lever to try to get them to take legislative action. What do you say to that?
I say that is a very cowardly response.
No, it's completely blackmail, pure and simple. We'll get into, again, what's really driving these actions by the president, who, by the way, apparently is confirming they plan to double down on what we're seeing right now all the way to November because they believe it's a winning election issue. Now, yesterday on Meet the Press, here's Kellyanne Conway deflecting blame for her boss, our commander-in-chief.
Nobody likes this policy. You saw the president on camera that he wants this to end, but everybody has, Congress has to act.
He can end it on his own.
Chuck, Congress passed a law that it is a crime. This is a congressional law from many years ago. It is a crime to enter this country illegally. So if they don't like that law, they should change it. If they don't like the fact that...
You can keep the families together. Why can't you find a way to still
Do you want the
potentially...
child in jail?
You
as
keep
opposed
the
to a
families together.
facility?
Why don't you create a family detention center?
Now, it's not just the usual suspects in the red and blue corner having this fight. I want you to take a look at some of the other voices, including maybe somebody Donald Trump ought to listen to, his wife Melania. Here she is weighing in on this issue, part of the statement released by the First Lady's office. Mrs. Trump hates to see children separated from their families and hopes both sides of the aisle can finally come together to achieve successful immigration reform. She believes we need to be a country that follows laws, but also a country that governs with heart. Much stronger than that, another Republican, former First Lady Laura Bush, she said this, and clearly she's disgusted by what she's saying. Here's part of what she had to say, quote, "I live in a border state. I appreciate the need to enforce and protect our international boundaries. But this zero-tolerance policy is cruel, it is immoral, and it breaks my heart. Our government should not be in the business of warehousing children in converted box stores or making plans to place them in tent cities in the desert outside of El Paso. These images eerily reminiscent of the Japanese-American internment camps of World War II, now considered to have been one of the most shameful episodes in U.S. history. And even Republican lawmakers, or at least some with a bit of courage, are speaking out. Here's Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina.
President Trump could stop this policy with a phone call.
He doesn't seem to acknowledge that.
Well, he can't. I'll go tell him. If you don't like families being separated, you can tell DHS stop doing it.
Of course he can. Now, the fact remains, prior administrations didn't do this, Republicans or Democrats. This is completely discretionary. This completely comes from the top. The Trump administration is using this newfound enforcement of this policy to split families. It's their choice. It's their action. They need to own it. Now, let's look closer at what is happening. As we told you Friday, about 2,000 kids have already been taken away in just the past 6 weeks. Do the math for you, about 50 a day. An old warehouse in South Texas is being used to house hundreds of children. The Associated Press, they gained access, and they described the scene. Now, again, this is the AP here, hardly some liberal bastion. Quote, "They're fenced in. As many as 20 kids to a cage," they reported. Metal foil is being used as blankets, bottles of water and bags of chips scattered around the floor. We're also hearing diapers are not being changed, and many of the guards won't even touch the kids at all. No comforting for the crying. Plus, they're running out of space. That's why the administration is considering putting hundreds of others at an Army base in Texas. It gets worse. They want to build a tent city for them in Texas in July. Plus, a shuttered Walmart is being used for hundreds of other children. But it's not just happening down south. In Elizabeth, New Jersey, on Father's Day, hundreds, they made their voices heard protesting an immigration facility housing dozens of fathers who were separated from their kids. A group of congressional Democrats from both New York and New Jersey also were there, and they wanted access to check the conditions. They were not allowed in. Here's Congressman Espaillat of Upper Manhattan.
You're going to let the police in, and you're going to let members of Congress come in? You're not going to let members of Congress, we're duly elected members of Congress, we're entitled to come in and visit these prisoners. We're entitled, this is unfair, unconstitutional.
But there may not be any end in sight to this crisis at the border, as I mentioned. Last week, Paul Ryan was saying that he would schedule votes on 2 bills this week, a moderate one and a hardline one. But then, on Friday, President Trump said he wouldn't support the moderate one. Dead on arrival was his words. Then the White House said he didn't really mean that. But today, the White House says he supports both. So if you have any idea where they are, you're a better person than I. No one has a clue. We do not know, though, where the administration may go, but we do know that Trump will meet with congressional Republicans tomorrow evening as they try to plot a way forward. And votes still expected this week on both bills, but unclear whether either has the votes to pass, or if they did, they'd get a signature on the president's desk. I want to bring in our panel. The two familiar faces you see here every night, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. And again, just a reminder to the audience, guys, that toll-free number at the bottom of your screen, we're taking your phone calls in for basically, we'll take you to at least the half-hour mark here as I hear what you have to say. Listen, I just saw a press conference, Andrew, where if they were really proud about what they were doing, they'd say that this is in the American self-interest. We're doing this because we think it's right. They completely, lying through their teeth, are blaming another political party for a discretionary action that they took, and they can't even get their act straight as to what the aim of it is, whether it's a law, whether it's a policy, or anything else. It was embarrassing what I saw from the podium within the last 45 minutes.
Yeah, there's a, Kirsten Nelson says that it's, a policy, or it's not a policy that we're doing this, but Stephen Miller said that it was. Kirsten Nelson said that we're not doing this as a deterrent, but Chief of Staff John Kelly said it was a deterrent. So the White House can't even get on the same page with all of this. And it's pretty obvious that they don't want to own the policy that they've implemented here. They don't want the blowback for it, but they won't happily take credit for it in conservative corners. And just as an aside, I mean, I've been politically aware since the late 70s. I thought the cruelest, most inhumane, most un-American policy I'd ever seen implemented by an administration was the torture of inmates at Guantanamo under the Bush administration. Those people were at least terror suspects. These are kids. I mean, I don't know who we are if we're continuing this policy. It's beneath us and beneath anything I can recall.
At the podium today, Dominic, DHS Secretary Nielsen said this is about national security. We got kids. Do you imagine our kids when they were 6 or younger being a threat to national security? I mean, Andrew said it as well as I did. I don't know what we're doing anymore. I don't know who we are. But the idea that we have kids, we're separating from their families. I'm not saying let anyone cross the border and do whatever they want, but these are kids. These aren't national security threats. They had nothing to do with this. And we're putting them potentially in tent cities, in the middle of the desert, in Texas, in the middle of the summer, and this is all of a sudden protecting this country?
Richard, it's a deterrent to what Andrew just, and it's a very unfair one. It's horrible. It's not the American way. We can go on for the next couple of hours describing how this is not the American way. He mentioned Guantanamo Bay, and at least those are terror suspects. I recall, because it's frightening for me to look at the video of those kids in cages, I went to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. And at the time, and I remember flying on the C-130 plane with the military, we were going over there to observe, before the terror suspects were there, Haitian refugees were kept at Guantanamo Bay. First of all, it is extremely hot there in Guantanamo Bay, and they had the same type of cages where Haitians were on the other side of the fence, almost like at the zoo when you would go feed an animal. And at least those were adults. These are children. This administration is trying to send a message that if you even attempt to come here, we're going to destroy your family. And they're doing a good job, and I don't mean that in a good way, of doing that.
And by the way, let's separate all the BS tonight. If the president got one thing, Andrew, that started with a W and ended with an L, if he got the funding for it, this goes away like that. Am I right?
Well, I mean, to hear the administration say it, they want more than that. They don't just want funding for the wall. They want an overhaul of all immigration laws. They want to reduce.
I think he'd take it if he got his wall.
He might, but that's not what they're saying. What they're saying is we want everything our way. We want everything that we've asked for. We want a reduction of legal immigration. We want the wall. We want beefed up security on the border. We want more manpower. We want more money. We want the end of the loopholes
or we're going to hold the kids hostage until you give me the money.
Right. And just as a point of, these kids are seeking asylum. These are not kids. There's not anybody that we're talking about right now who's jumped the fence and has crossed the river and is looking just to find a home. They're seeking asylum. They have a reason to fear returning to their homes. It's always been our policy that asylum seekers are granted at least some foothold in the U.S. while their case is being heard to see if there's any clarity to all this. So all the criminalization of these kids or of their families is misplaced as well. And that's another change in our policy, that we're now treating asylum seekers as criminals.
And you hear former first ladies, including George W. Bush's wife, Laura Bush, calling this immoral, comparing this to what we did with the internment of the Japanese, who, by the way, Ronald Reagan condemned as an embarrassing chapter in American history and formally apologized for doing that. And we're doing it again in 2018, and the president's proud of it. All right. When we come back from the break, I want to hear what you have to say. I'm going to show you some numbers also when we come back. Here's some poll numbers. And if you think everybody feels the way the three of us do, you're wrong. So we're going to tell you where the public pulse is on this, and also, most importantly, get yours. Toll-free number, you see it on the screen, 888-733-2428. We're going to get your thoughts straight ahead.